Welcome back everyone to another Weather at a Glance video. In today's forecast, we're going to be going over a big winter storm coming over the Christmas weekend here. This is going to be heading from Friday all the way through to Monday. We have a lot to talk about in this video, so let's get right into it. All right, and on our first slide, we're taking a look at that precipitation type and rate with the GFS forecast model. And here so far, you can see our winter storm over here starting off over in the northwestern Great Plains, and you can see that it moves eastward, kind of does a little curveball move there, and then it's going to head up into the northeast. You can see with this system, we have a lot of tightening isobars, and we have a very rapid lowering pressure with this as well. So potentially near record lowering. We see that goes from about a 980 millibar low pressure system all the way down to 960 very quickly within about a 24-hour period. So very rapid intensification, very rapidly lowering pressure with this. So again, you can see this starts off over kind of the Rocky Mountains. It's going to then head eastward, northeastward. You can see that rapid intensification. It gets down to about 960 millibars. Basically what that means, we have very low pressure, a lot of strengthening. We have a potential bomb cyclone bomb low pressure system here. We see that potential with this as well. I know there's been a lot of talk about that as well, but that's kind of what we're expecting with this. So there's a lot of potential for us to undergo bombogenesis with this system here. So basically what that means, we're going to have a very strong, rapidly intensifying low pressure system, and that's only going to increase the type of conditions we're going to be seeing here. So again, you can see with the isobars, we're going to have a lot of those winds come down with this, very strong wind gusts and a lot of heavy snow with that as well over here in these bands. All right, now taking a look at the temperature factor of this, we're going to start off with our 2-meter AGL temperature anomaly in degrees Fahrenheit with the GFS forecast model here. And first thing we're going to look at is these below average temperatures. We're talking anywhere from about 30 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit below average for a lot of these portions over here in the Great Plains. And then as we move eastward, we see a lot of these 30 degree Fahrenheit, even into some potential areas of 40 as that moves eastward. We see some potentially about 40 degrees below average in Missouri. Over here in the Ohio Valley, we see about we see about 20 to 30 degrees below average. There's a lot of very cold conditions. And then, of course, as we get into the southeastern United States, even down to portions of Texas, we see a lot of those 20 to 30 degree below average temperatures. Very cold conditions, and I am a little bit more concerned for the southeastern United States, about the south central and southeastern United States here due to this cold, because y'all don't really see that type of cold that often. This is a lot of cold coming down here, very well below average temperatures coming with this system. Now for the northern areas, this is definitely going to be very intense as well. In fact, that's where the most intense factors are kind of going to go on with this system. But down here to the south, you guys aren't usually used to this, so it's definitely going to be something you need to consider as you're going to be traveling on the holidays. Please take that into consideration, plan around this event, and especially with that extreme cold. Now, we talked about the anomaly. Let's get into the actual temperatures we're expecting to see with this. So as you can see, starting off, we're already seeing some of those negative 16, negative 20 degree temperatures, frigid cold temperatures with this. This is something you do not want to be outside and very uncomfortable. You don't want to be dealing with these. And this is going to be over starting today, Thursday, moving into Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We see the most cold is kind of within this region here that I drew, but then that punches eastward. We see that very deep trough movement around that low pressure system, and this is going to wrap this around and shove it upward into the northeast. And we see a lot of these in the Ohio Valley here. We see a lot of these negative degree temperatures. So here we have about -1, -3, -5. A lot of those very cold negative temperatures. The majority of the extreme cold is going to be up here in portions of Montana, the Dakotas, and down in Nebraska and northeastern Colorado, areas of Colorado and Wyoming. We see all those areas getting that really extreme negative cold. But the factor that we have to think about is the wind chill, which we're going to get into next. That's going to be a big concern for these areas around the Great Lakes. And pretty much a lot of the areas around here, even into the northeast, we're going to have a lot of wind that's going to kind of drop these temperatures to even colder conditions. All right, now moving on here, we're taking a look at that wind here. So this is our 925 millibar height and wind. This is just a little bit above the surface here. So this is going to give us kind of an idea of where the most extreme wind is going to be happening. So we see that rapidly intensifying low pressure system up here to the north, you can see, and we have a lot of those isobars cranking and tightening around that low pressure system. That signifies a lot of increased wind gusts. We see a lot of winds wrapping around there. And first off, you can see that cold front come through. You can see that cold front motion come through to the south, bringing a lot of that cold air down there. And over the Great Lakes, we see a lot of those 60 to 65 knot winds at the 925 millibar level, and as well as around in the Ohio Valley. This area, once we come around to the next movement again, you can see that we have pretty much for the Great Lakes, that's where we expect those potentially blizzard-like conditions. Now, it's kind of hard to say if we will see a blizzard for this region. That's still a little bit tricky to forecast. Even though we're very close in, it's kind of going to be iffy still, so keep that in mind. But there is definitely a possibility of a blizzard happening within the Ohio Valley here, the northern Ohio Valley. So we're talking about portions of Indiana, northern Indiana to be specific, and northwestern Ohio. This is kind of the area, and of course southern Michigan as well. Those are kind of the areas that we're expecting those blizzard conditions, even to potentially becoming a blizzard. You see a lot of that. That's right near the low pressure center, so we're going to have a lot of those increased wind gusts. As we get closer to the low pressure center, we get increased winds. And as you can see there, we have a lot of those increased winds right there as that rapid intensification occurs right over here over the Great Lakes. That's kind of where those most intense wind gusts are going to be. And that we're also factoring in those extreme wind chills as well. That's going to kind of be a big factor for those areas that we were talking about just a moment ago. So a lot of snow, a lot of very cold temperatures, and very high wind gusts as well for those areas. All right, now let's put all this together. We have our 2-meter AGL wind chill with the GFS forecast model here. And let's take a look at Thursday here. So we're starting off with these negative 30-degree temperatures. That's wind chills there, and you can see as that moves eastward, we are looking into the potential for negative 20 to negative 30 degree Fahrenheit wind chills with the system. We see that cold front come through, negative 25, negative 18 around the Pittsburgh area. We see negative 11, Cincinnati, Ohio. We're seeing around kind of negative 15 as well. So very cold temperatures, and even in the portions of Ohio, we see as this cold front moves through, we see about negative 18 to negative 19 there. So very, very cold conditions up here in the portions near Davenport and over here into Iowa. We see negative temperatures, wind chills down into about negative 30, negative 31, negative 32. Very cold conditions. So those strong wind gusts are going to bring intense wind chills with that as well. And we're talking intense because this is going to be one of the coldest Christmases in decades in recent history. So we're talking about very, very cold temperatures here. This is not something that we're trying to underplay here. This is definitely something that you want to pay attention to. I know a lot of people have been talking about this. It's been the hype. It's been the news for the last week or so in the weather community, but you can see that these conditions are going to be very intense. And notice over here in the mountainous regions where we get a lot of those extreme wind gusts, starting around today and then tomorrow morning, we see those wind chills into negative 50. So you can see we have about negative 55. That's potential on some of these mountaintops. Now, of course, nobody's up on those mountaintops, but the point is that around those valleys too, we see a lot of those strong wind gusts, and that is going to factor in that cold. A lot of cold air coming. All right, now we're going to start looking into our forecast models and what they say for the total snowfall with this system. So we're going to start off with our GDPS, our Canadian forecast model here. And first things first, we're going to take a look at kind of what this is saying. So we're not going to get too into details yet because we have our final forecast map that we're going to go over at the end for snowfall on our opinions. But you can see so far, we see some of these heavier snowfall totals up in the mountains here. This area is really not our main focus with the storm, though there is going to be a lot of cold. This is kind of typical snowfall when the system moves through. So we're not really focusing too much over here. Now, as we move into the eastern portions, we start to see some of those snowier conditions here. We get some of those 1 to 3 inch totals. The majority of this is going to be about 1 to 3 inches. We don't really have a lot of available moisture for this. It's not really going to get too much moisture. Therefore, we're really not going to get too much snowfall for a lot of these areas. But this is going to create that same style event. We're going to see a lot of those heavier snowfall totals remaining around the lakes. And of course, as we get farther north, we see a lot of those heavier snowfall totals as well. But mainly for much of the United States, we're going to see, for the areas that are impacted by snow, we're mainly seeing around 1 to 4 inches. All right, moving on next to our European forecast model, the ECMWF high res here, we're going to take a look at similar conditions. As you can see, mainly around 1 to 4 inches. We see a bit more activity for the mountainous regions. We see some of those 6 to even 12 inches up there in portions of New York, northeastern New York. Again, similar activity for the mountains over here in the west, and of course that deepening moisture that kind of creates that intense snowfall that kind of occurs over the lakes here. We're going to see a lot of that. So everything's kind of agreeing for heavier snowfall around the lakes. Mainly minor impacts of snowfall throughout the rest of the areas that are forecast to be impacted by snow. We see a little more snow activity with the European than we did with the GDPS over here in the kind of north central portions of the Great Plains here for portions of eastern Montana and the Dakotas. So we see a little more activity there, but nothing really changes too much. All right, now finally moving on to the GFS forecast model. This is kind of looking very similar to those two other ones that we just went over. But as you can see, again, we're looking at that typical snowfall for the mountainous regions. Nothing really has changed too much. A little bit less snowfall for portions of Washington here for those mountains in Washington up there. Then we get into the Great Plains. We see a little, pretty much agreeing with the GDPS, the Canadian forecast model, a little bit less snowfall in eastern Montana and the Dakotas over there. But then we see a lot of that typical 1 to 4 inch snowfall totals for here. Again, keeping that East Coast kind of clean of snowfall because of those warmer conditions at the surface level. So it's going to kind of keep things a little bit warmer at the mid levels and surface levels, kind of keeping snow away. But then we see a little more snowfall activity for these mountainous regions. Again, more so than the other two have shown. For a lot of portions of Pennsylvania, we see about 6 to 12 inches possible, especially down in West Virginia there, and eastern West Virginia. And then we get up to New York, and we see about 12 inches up there. And then, of course, in the northern areas, in some of those valleys in Vermont, we do see some of those lower conditions, about half an inch or so of snowfall. So that's kind of what the GFS is showing. But then, of course, we get up here and again, just similar snowfall totals of anywhere of 1 to 4 inches, some spotty areas of 6 to 12 inches. So again, those lake effect snowfall totals showing a lot of potential for heavy snowfall around the Great Lakes. They're all saying similar things, so we kind of get the idea of what we're looking at here. So let's put this all together into one final product that we can look at. All right, in our final product here, we have our Weather at a Glance snowfall forecast map for this storm that is coming through. So we're going to get into this. We're going to list the cities off, the main cities that are in this, and let's get into it. So first off, we're going to start to our 1 to 2 inch region here. This is going to include portions east of Seattle and Portland, Oregon. Then we're going to head eastward. Kind of a lot of these mountainous regions you can see here kind of being included. We have Denver, Colorado included in this. We have Rapid City, South Dakota. We have Great Falls, Montana, kind of included in that as well. Fargo, North Dakota there, we see it is included in this 1 to 2 inch region. Now do keep in mind to the north here in these Great Plains areas, North Great Plains areas up here, we don't have any snowfall included here. This doesn't mean you won't see any snowfall, but you're going to see less than 1 inch. So anything blue and above, you can see our scale here is around 1 to 2 inches. So this means that you will likely at least see 1 inch of snowfall. So again, I know some people down here in the south are going to see some light snowfall, some light dusting. We're not going to try and forecast that. We're just going to keep it at 1 inch starting levels. So let's continue. St. Louis, Missouri, about 1 to 2 inches there. Omaha, Nebraska, 1 to 2 inches. In Boston, as well as New York City, we see 1 to 2 inches, and Washington, D.C., right on that 1 to 2 inch level, so probably more around 1 inches of snowfall there. Now, getting into our next level here, we're going to move on to the 2 to 4 inches here. No specific cities besides Chicago here that are on that 2 to 4 inch level. So Chicago is the only city here, but then we see a lot of those 2 to 4 inches kind of remaining around, just around the Great Lakes and kind of over here in the Northeast. We're going to see a lot of those areas being affected by that 2 to 4 inch level, as well as the mountains up here over in the Rocky Mountains and other mountainous regions in the west. Now moving on, we have our 4 to 8 inch region. This is going to be including portions northeast of Salt Lake City, up in those mountains near Salt Lake City, up here in portions of Idaho and Washington as well. Then we go up here to the Great Lakes. We see a lot of these areas included in that 4 to 8 inch region, including northern Maine up here in the northeast, and just a lot of areas around the Great Lakes getting that moisture activity that we need, as well as from the northeast being included with the Atlantic. We get a lot of that moisture coming in, just a lot of moisture to create that increased snowfall. Now on our final level here, we're taking a look at our 8 to 12 inch region. We see for portions of the northern Great Lakes here up in Michigan. So Michigan gets quite a bit of this activity with 8 to 12 inches. We see some of these areas here in 8 to 12 inches. Some portions of northern New York, so right there about Buffalo, New York there. And then we also see for portions up here in far northern Washington, we could see some levels up there. That's likely happening tonight into tomorrow. So again, we're moving eastward. So stuff over here that's happening is going to be more recent to this forecast, and then stuff that happens over in the eastern United States is going to be more this weekend based. So sooner and then later, kind of what we're looking at. All right, I want to thank you all so much for watching today's video. I would ask you consider subscribing for more U.S. forecasts free of charge, and I would ask you consider following the Weather at a Glance official Facebook page for more inside information and complimentary personal forecasts when you message me on my Facebook page. Again, I want to thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.